Hello, good people. This is Dr. TaSha. I wanted to first apologize for not being with you. I am traveling at the moment, but I wanted to take some time to give a bit of context for the information we will share with you today regarding the backlash and the extent of this backlash to Black culture, DEI, critical race theory, anti-racist education, and all of the things, okay? And so, first, I want to just reiterate that freedom schools are being revived in this moment because we are here again. We've been here before in terms of an entrenchment of white supremacy in our institutions and our government. And during the 60s, as a part of the civil rights movement and the movement in Mississippi in particular, which was a really radical campaign that we never learned about when learning about the civil rights movement, activists created the freedom schools as a way to prepare the people to fight, to prepare the people to struggle, to prepare the people to even participate in the political process, but give them the tools to reimagine something radically different, that can transform this society. And so freedom schools are not about hierarchy in terms of having a teacher and the student learns from the teacher. It's about community learning together. Teachers are facilitators, students are any age from, preschool to 80, 90 years old. That was the case in Mississippi in 1964 when the freedom schools were created. And so there have been calls and initiatives since probably 2020, at least, to expand the idea and expand the space for freedom schools to emerge in these times so that we, again, arm ourselves, our children, and everyone in the community really to fight, to struggle, to protect our freedoms and to transform our society in ways that will truly liberate us. And so today, I wanted to make sure that you all had a document that I created. Um, I created this document earlier this year to try to make sense of, or at least track, the backlash that is being perpetuated and in our government and the way that Black culture, Black history has been manipulated. And it also was it became necessary for me to think about ways to arm ourselves in war. I've been saying this for years that we are at war, and a lot of times we haven't really recognized that and prepared ourselves, and especially preparing our children in this space where Blackness is being under attack. And so um, when it became evident, with this new administration, that's the old administration, I do mean the Trump administration, was very adamant about rolling back what we would consider some of the gains of the civil rights movement, and definitely the spirit of that movement that did transform our society, in which, the legacies of white supremacy are still with us for sure. But in terms of policies, institutional practices, that were really about elevating white supremacy, protecting white supremacy, excluding not only Black people, but people of color, excluding women, so all of these attacks on DEI as we are experiencing today, down to attacking, any types of policies and uh, um, practices that open up opportunities for people who are disabled, is a part of the civil rights legacy, which is why it's also under attack under this umbrella of DEI. Any rate, one of the first things that this administration did when it was sworn in on Martin Luther King's birthday of this year, 2025, was to start that attack on the King holiday. And all of that was carefully orchestrated. And so in this document, I keep track of all of these presidential memos. I can't even say they're executive orders. What we're seeing today is a total break from decorum, from tradition, or what have you, right? And so while it has been normal for presidents, the last several decades to issue executive orders that have some power, this administration has gone all the way. But what I found was that these aren't always executive orders. These people will write up a memo, okay, degrading our history, our culture, our presence through DEI, and treat it as law. All right. And so in this document, Teaching Race and Culture, there is a summary of the memos and executive orders that were passed immediately in the Trump administration that we all need to be aware of. The trick is that although people are suggesting, especially the right wing, are suggesting that this is the law now, that you can't teach about race, that you can't disparage America, if you talk about its racism or institutional practices of discrimination, that you are somehow breaking the law. Um, I tried to tease out what the memos and executive order actually says, which is not law, okay, but it's been treated as lawful, and has the power of law. You have the benefit of having a excellent attorney in the room and in the space that can help us think about this as well from her expertise, Marcia. And I really wanted to talk to you about this. But if you all look through what the memos and executive orders actually say and what we actually do in our classrooms, in our workspaces, there's a huge disconnect, right? And so part of this is definitely about manipulation. It's definitely about disinformation. All right. And so those are some key things to pay attention to. The strategies of disinformation, misinformation, uh, and this goes back to our core concept we talked about with our last meeting with miseducation, right? So if you could miseducate, keep the people miseducated, then you could push all kinds of policies. And so it also reminds us that education is inextricably linked to policy, to politics. And so that's again why the freedom schools are so important in terms of the reasons why we say we need a political education. As with the Black Panthers also expanding it with their liberation schools. Like we have to have a political education. Um, and so take a look at those executive orders so you see what it actually says and how ridiculous it is. And I wanted to make note that a lot of this backlash was tested in Florida, if you recall, with Governor DeSantis banning CRT early on, banning Black history, women's studies, attacking it, and even on a university level. And they have taken that playbook and have expanded it. So in those pages of the document, there is a small image of a poster from one of the laws in Florida that banned CRT and DEI before the Trump administration when it took office again. And so I want you to take a look at that and really tease out what does it say that we're doing in the classroom or in the workplace, and what are we actually doing, and how can we create pathways to resist. So we can't resist, I don't think, effectively if we don't fully know. So Ida B. Wells always said in her writings when she led an anti-lynching campaign, in order for the people to act, they must know. And so that's the spirit of the document. In order for the people to act, they must know. My partner and I took some time to look through those memos, try to find what they actually say, summarize them in this document. But in this document, I also offer some strategies of how we might combat it. I think we are so far even beyond what I was thinking, when I created this document, maybe around February, May, earlier on this year. We are so far beyond what was actually documented here. And so we need to put our heads together and talk about how do we actually combat and defend what we're doing and insist and that we will persist and who we are and our culture, protecting our culture, our history, because people can't tell us that we can't study our history or teach our history or be who we are and study our culture, preserve our culture. That would be unconstitutional, but also inhumane. And so take a look at the document. Take a look at the strategies that I offer we were brainstorming how do we tackle this, and let's build on it. We need to put our heads together to figure this thing out. And so I hope that you find it useful. Maybe we can continue having conversations offline, or maybe online since we are meeting offline. And so I'd be really curious to see what you think about it. In the end, it may take some time for you to sit with it too. And so we can decide how we might offer opportunities to circle back and have a running conversation about what's in this document and ways we might prepare ourselves to fight, to struggle. The last thing I want to say is that it had been really heavy on my heart in a good way from our last meeting. Just kind of thinking about like, why are we still here? Why are we still fighting? Like, that's been the fact of Blackness, is that we have persevered through extraordinary, challenges at every stage. It is something that just disrupts our um, ability to just be, to just be. So I was really feeling that from the last conversation, and how we shouldn't even be in a position whereas we have to introduce our young people to the madness, of racism. And but I think what is has been helpful in Black studies for me, and what I probably should have kind of insisted upon when during our first meeting, which I thought was, it was great in terms of my experience, but it's really important that we instill um, a sense of empowerment and humanity. I'm trying to find the words in our young people first, like to make sure that as soon as our young people, even before they're born, that they are exposed to our magnificence, the beauty and joy and love of Black culture, and let that be the foundation, before we arm them to fight the madness. And so I was thinking about this in terms of the performance from the theater group out of New York that we watched in our last meeting. And we do have to think about even, so that was a moment from the Black Power era, that we are in a moment of struggle, and that our kids are not going to be um, prepared to fight, or at least to ward off or protect themselves from all this negative energy and all of this hate, and all of these actual active attempts to destroy our young people's sense of self, and to create barriers so that they cannot progress or achieve what they, seek to be in this life, in this country. And so these are some real deal challenges. And so, again, we could talk about it and come back and circle back to these conversations, but it's so important that we know that we are at war right now, and that we actually look at and understand um, the uh, the weapons that are being used against us. And so I'll stop there. Don't want to take up too much time, but thank you for listening. And I'm looking forward to connecting with you all for our next meeting. And again, we'll talk about some ways that we may continue to have conversations online, not in person, so that we can keep the momentum going and keep the ideas circulating to build with one another. Thank you.